we're lucky to live in a city that's very dense with anchor institutions and government and faith-based institutions that are actually in these conversations. They're thinking about, so, you know, the hospitals here are thinking about social determinants of health and going upstream to look at housing and education. You've got the faith-based institutions that are saying, what is our power in terms of procurement practice, in terms of investing? One of our first investments was from a local synagogue. There have been churches that are involved in bringing their congregants into, congregation members into the Ujima Fund as investors. The piece that anchors and government hold is control of real estate, right? So how does real estate get allocated from government? How does it get invested in? How does it get used if you're an anchor institution? I will say that the procurement piece has been a really touchy subject in Boston. We've had procurement policies. First of all, you've got to change the policy. So there's often a lot of policy about WMBE, women and minority business enterprises. We had to work hard with the city to recognize cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives as a category. So you've got to change that policy and recognition. Then you've got to deal with, is there compliance with policy? And we've certainly had a challenge with that. There's lots of articles that have been written about that, especially last year. And so is government both going to have the procurement policy and then push on compliance with it in terms of who they source from? It's certainly a really big issue around real estate and general contracting. And then you can get more progressive into topics like participatory budgeting, which has happened here, public banking, which is, there's a big move around here, and lots of experiments that have been happening with universal basic income. Obviously, really big thing, tax policy is probably the biggest lever, and this is not probably a forum for us to get into that. But I guess the last thing I'll say is, you know, in 2020, when the CARES Act came down in its first iteration, it was not in a form that was supportive for entrepreneurs of color. And that triggered us being part of the formation of something called the Coalition for an Equitable Economy, where many capital providers and technical assistance providers throughout Massachusetts came together to say, we actually really do have to shape both the federal legislation coming down, as well as the state municipal policies in order to ensure that they have the communities of color at the center of how we execute on these ideas.